It's no secret that every single band's in-ear rig is their secret weapon into bringing a live show that's not only tight, but immersive. Click tracks, cues, and count-ins, when done well, all serve to elevate the experience of an audience member. And the best part is that when it's done properly, you would never ever know unless you're looking right at the person's ears. But what is in their ears? What is the perfect mix? How do bands determine what's best for them to turn these in-ear rigs into their secret weapon? In our in-ear rig, every single band member has their own Sennheiser G4 wireless unit, and that really benefits us individually. Combined with our Sennheiser wireless instrument packs, we are free to move around the stage as much as we want, which allows us to bring a more interesting, entertaining, and immersive show, all while still having an extremely consistent mix in our ears to make us play the best that we can. This is especially helpful to our style of music, being a little bit more prog orientated. Lots of syncopation, weird time signatures, weird count-ins, all that stuff. For this video, I got Steven, my drummer, and Keyan, my bassist, to come over and tell us about their in-ear mixes, and I'll be going through how I set mine up as well, how we dial it, why we dial it that way, and what it means for us in the moment on stage. Just to give you guys an idea what's possible with an in-ear rig like this, or even cheaper, and how it helps us, along with many other bands, put on the best show possible.
3, 4.
When I'm dialing in my in-ear mix, I guess the thing that I'm mainly looking for is the click and myself, and quite a bit of the drum kit to be louder than everything else. I'm really dialed into like locking in with the drum kit, just, you know, writing music in front of a desk all the time. It kind of translates to playing live as well, like having that instant feedback of when I'm locking in with a kick drum and stuff like that. So you probably notice that as I go through the mix, a lot of it is kind of drums, click, and then guitar, then everything else kind of just takes a back seat. I was more into having everything kind of feel like the song at one stage, but I kind of changed over a couple of different tours because the songs got a little bit harder with the new music that just came out recently, so I would a bit more. And I ended up turning myself up just a little bit and turning the tracks down just a touch, but relatively the guitars are still quite in tune with the tracks. It's just a tiny bit louder. I guess like in the sense where Steven kind of wants to be able to hear himself in the click, almost like he's practicing, and kind of is the opposite, where he kind of wants to feel the mix a little bit more as a song and as an experience. I'm kind of like in that middle ground of both, I think, and I think that's why it's good to have the 3 separate in-ear systems, so we're not kind of chained. Clearly we all have different preferences, so it's good to kind of be comfortable on stage and, you know, not have any shortcomings and not feel like we're not getting the full experience that we want.
Keyan and Keyan swap positions. Stand by. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So going through my mix, you can tell it's pretty drum heavy, although a lot of the cymbals are taken down a little bit. Typically the stages that we play are relatively small. We have played some bigger stages, but we haven't done it in a little while. And since doing that, you know, the cymbals have gone down a little bit because we're just so close to the cymbals at any given moment that there's a lot of bleed. Even with like the molded in-ears, it's still obviously very loud when you're standing a couple meters next to it. So having that down allows for just like the natural bleed to come through, and it's quite nice. It's a very satisfying kind of cymbal sound as opposed to having it be really harsh in your ears. So kick in is pretty much at 0. Kick out is a little bit lower. I kind of like the more slappy kick from the kick in mic rather than the more beefy one from the kick out. Snare top and snare bottom, kind of the same ratio that I would do when mixing. Snare top's a little bit stronger, but again, snare, especially Steven's snare, it's the Matt Halpin snare. It's so loud and it's tuned quite well so that when he hits it and gives it a nice rim shot, it's ridiculously loud and it doesn't need to be that loud in the ears. Hi-hats down, rack tom 2 are kind of the same. I do like to hear the toms in my ears because again, they're more of like a rhythmic thing. Any sort of shell piece, any sort of like rhythmic piece is important to me because more often than not, there's some sort of syncopation happening throughout the songs that requires me to kind of play in time with them. So whether it's like a kick or a snare or the toms in this case, I like having them dialed up a bit. Riot again is low, the China, the overheads, they're all low. Obviously kick triggers are down because they're just being used as side chains for gates. Ghost guitar and then the tracks, so they're kind of the same. Ghost guitar is a little bit louder because I want to lock in with that while I'm playing. It's very easy to tell between myself and the ghost track when I'm playing off. And I guess that's the benefit of playing to a ghost track, is that when it's rhythms and I'm playing on one side in my ears, I can hear when I'm lagging or when I'm rushing, because that ghost track is, pretty much dead on. So that, in conjunction with like the tracks just being a little bit lower, as I said at the start, like I've been having my guitar a little bit louder lately because the songs are getting a little bit more difficult. So I find that really helps. The track guitars are kind of the same as my guitars. The idea behind that is that when I'm kind of going in and out of rhythms and leads, I don't want it to feel like there's like a massive jump or any like gray area. It kind of just all feels the same and consistent. Click is just as loud as everything. Cues are really loud. Cues are actually the loudest thing in my mix. I haven't touched it since tour, but I think with the new set list that we just did, there was a lot of cues in there. We just went to Ableton for everything. So there's a lot of cues, every section, every verse, every chorus, every time there's a solo, every time there's a new song start, every count in, every break, there's someone screaming numbers in our ears. And I want to make sure that I can hear every single thing in there, along with some funny ones in there as well. Bass I've got quite low in my mix. It's still audible, but I find that with our bass tone that we use live, it's much like the studio stuff where it's almost like an extension of the guitar, and just being, in in-ears and not playing on the biggest of stages, sometimes turning up bass sounds really good for the more top end side of the bass, but with the low end, it kind of gets a little bit muddy. So I can still hear the top end distortion of the bass very clearly, even with the mix this low on the bass, but I just like having it at that point. So it's kind of sitting underneath everything. If I was to mute the bass, just like the original tracks, it would kind of just disappear. And that's kind of how I like to have it in my ears. My guitars are pretty much at a level as well. They're pretty much just as loud as anything else in the mix, which is fairly standard. My vocal mic's just a little bit lower. That will change every night depending on what microphone we get fed, but typically we have an optigate on the microphone, so there's a little sensor that only opens up when something is in front of it. And that's really helpful because, especially being in an instrumental band, if I'm playing around on stage, I can move around freely and not get any bleed from the kit behind me or from the stage in the front through that microphone. It just keeps the mix super, super clean. It's really obvious when it opens up in the ears, especially when it's that loud, which is good because I want to be able to have that differentiation. Stage shout is a little bit lower. Again, that will kind of change night to night depending on what mic they give us for a stage shout, but I don't really need to hear that super, super loud. I do like to have it in my mix in case something is going wrong and someone is conversing on the stage shout, but it's just there enough so that I can hear it just within the mix, if that makes sense. Crowd left and crowd right, as in just like the ambient mics in front of the stage pointing towards the crowd, are loud in this mix. I'm not sure why. Maybe they would just start a little bit quieter. I don't typically have them that loud, but maybe for this most recent tour, I was kind of wanting to hear more of that kind of room reverberation, kind of get the sense that I'm, playing in a room as opposed to being super, super isolated in the ears, even though we're kind of always chasing that isolation. It's kind of a backwards thing. And that's pretty much it. A very simple mix, but the main gist of it is that, click, kick drum, shells, and guitars are pretty much louder than everything else. Tracks are underneath that, and then bass is just underneath that. And that gives me a clear picture of what I'm playing on stage and where I can be locking in and stuff like that.
4.
Hey guys, my name's Steven. I play drums with Keyan. For me, when it comes to dialing in my in-ear mix, having the click as the clearest thing is definitely the most important for me. Hopefully means that the rest of the band is all tight and locked in as well. It means I'm staying in time with the boys because I know they're super locked in when it comes to their rhythms as well. And it's so important for this type of music where it's very staccato, there's lots of stabs, that everything is right on the grid where it needs to be. So having that click as clear as it can be is definitely essential. Having the click nice and clear also means not having everything else too loud. So I want to be able to hear what Keyan and Keyan are playing. I want to be able to hear the tracks so I know where we are in the song as well, to a level where I know what's happening, but not to where it's overpowering the drum mix as well as the click. When it comes to my drum mix specifically, I like to have that a little bit louder than the rest of the tracks and the band, just to make sure it's really clear. As long as I've got the kicks and snare in my ears, everything else is just kind of nice to have. So by sitting behind the kit while I'm playing, I'm pretty much getting a lot of bleed from cymbals and toms, things like that. But having that kick can sometimes get lost. So making sure that's nice and clear in my ears is pretty crucial, and making sure that's also lining up nicely with the metronome.
Tynan and Keyan swap positions. Stand by. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, so looking at my mix here, you can clearly see that I've got both my kick in and outs quite loud. Like I said, I like to have them definitely on top of everything else. The snare cuts through quite a bit, even without having it in my ears. So I've kind of got that a little bit lower. Same thing with the hats. I get a lot of bleed, so I don't really need those too loud. The toms I like to have quite loud. Sometimes they can get lost. Again, ride's quite low. Same with the other overheads and the china. It's just nice to have a little bit of that in my ears, but I get a lot of that from the bleed. We've got some of the triggers here, but everything else from here on out, I try to keep quite level. I like to try and mimic what it sounds like in my ears while I'm practicing. So if I'm practicing to the tunes that we're going to play live, I'm listening along to the tracks, which are mixed by Keyan, and everything's nicely done. So I try to mimic that in my ears, but just have it below everything else. So you can see all the IEM tracks, the guitars, the bass, everything else is quite even, except the clicks, obviously, through the roof. We want that nice and clear. The click is like the olive oil, you know? You can't cook a good dish unless it's soaked in the olive oil. So you load up on that, load up on the click, everything else will be happy days after that. So having Keyan's vocals in my mix is quite important as well, especially for those moments where he's going, "What's up, Melbourne?" You know, I need to know to do something rather than just do one of these while he's talking, you know, like knowing what's going on, knowing what Keyan's saying to the crowd, knowing what those responses are, you know, it might seem small, but it's actually quite important to the whole show. Having that stage shout as well, just enough in the ears to know if anything's gone wrong, is also super crucial. There was moments on the last tour where we needed to make quite a few quick changes or quick adjustments because something had gone wrong. Having that stage shout in our ears helps us communicate between each other on stage, and even to get Chris in our ears, our front of house, because there was definitely a few moments where we needed to think on the spot and problem solve, and having that mic to kind of chat to each other was super important to make sure everyone was on the same page and we could make sure that we got through those problems as quickly as possible and continue with the show. Things that I would like to change in the future, I guess they would only be if I was to upgrade my actual in-ears themselves to be able to close up that maybe 2% extra and have that real tight fit in my ears to block out that bleed. Means I can probably have a little bit more bass. That's probably the one thing that I wish I could have a bit louder, but if I crank it up too loud, it starts to make things a bit muddy. Eventually, when it comes time to upgrade to some nicer in-ears, can start to hear kind of a little bit nicer, a little bit clearer. That would be nice.
3, 4.
I'm Keyan and I play bass with Keyan. Typically what I look for in an IAM mix is click and bass. The rest I can have kind of leveled out. Lately I've been clicking bass a bit lower so I can actually hear the song in a more full way and like enjoy it live. And especially with the last tour, I've been feeling pretty comfortable with everything. So it hasn't been too stressful either way, like I know the songs well enough. Click's important because that's I guess the thing we all share, that's the thing we're sticking to. We have tracks, so to stay in time with the tracks, you need to stay in time with the click. Kind of, I guess, the North Star of the band. Like if I can stay in time with the click, I know it's all good. Bass, I guess it's pretty obvious. I want to hear myself play and make sure I'm playing the right things and making it all sound good. Kick is the other thing, and that's really, there's a lot of parts where bass is more so following the kick instead of the guitar. And I want to, make sure I'm locked in with Steven.
Tynan and Keyan swap
thing with drums. I don't have like, it's really just kick and snare that I care about. The rest, I get enough bleed through just being on stage. I still have a little bit of like overheads in there, whatever, but kick's the loudest, and then like a bit of snare top and bottom. Hi-hat, stuff like that, like it just kind of adds to the mix and just kind of makes it sound messy when everything's happening at once. Like not super necessary. Yep, and like chime and overhead, blah, blah, blah. Ghost guitar and track guitar, like little extra stuff. I have a bit quieter than Keyan's live track, so I can still differentiate it and tell the difference. Click, normally I just have it like super duper high. It's a bit lower from the last tour, but it's still punching over everything. Bass, kind of the same story. Used to have it like maxed out. I've kind of ducked it down so it sounds like the full mix. Bit more instead of just like playing with click and bass in my ears, because then it starts to feel more like I'm practicing than performing. Yeah, guitar a bit louder, Keyan's guitar a bit louder. Vocals up loud enough that I can hear what's happening. Yeah, I have the Qs a bit lower. I used to have them super high. I still hear them, but I found before they would just override everything. Like going into a section, I was just counted into everything. And it's super helpful when I need it. But I found for the last tour, I was comfortable with the songs and it was all good. So I just dropped it down a bit. So it's just kind of like a subtle thing in the background. So if I feel like I'm unsure, I can still hear it, but it doesn't override anything. Yeah, so the stage, like the shout mic, I don't have too loud, but I have loud enough that I can just kind of hear what's happening if something goes wrong. And then if I know things are going wrong, I can hear it enough to hear what's happening and then like look around and work out from everyone else. And I also have the crowd mics up a bit, and it just makes it feel less like a super dry mix. I feel like I can hear the room a bit more, what people are saying in the crowd, because I feel like, especially at the last tour, there are a few bits where we were talking between the crowd, and like when you have in-ears in and everything's just super like molded in-ears, you can't really hear what people say in the crowd at all. So that kind of helps a bit. The hearing the room thing does depend on the show. It's probably also just a preference of like, it feels weird having like a super dry mix. Same with like if I just cut out all the overheads, because I don't need them, but the feeling of like the extra noise does kind of make it feel more normal. Having the crowd mics there, it feels like you're experiencing the show with everyone else. It's a small thing, and it might just be me, I'm not sure. I think definitely for a while, like all of us, it was the first time I used in-ears. Initially it felt really weird. I felt like isolated. I don't know, it's not what I was used to. Like other bands I've played in were all just like amps on stage, like hardcore bands like engaging with the crowd. So I think having the crowd mics, a little bit extra noise, it kind of levels it out for me. Also, the molded ears had like changed everything for me because the bass came through so much clearer. Before then, I could hear everything fine, but the rumble of the bass wouldn't really come through. So yeah, there's a few things that have just made the whole experience of using in-ears way more enjoyable.
Shout out to Sennheiser for being awesome. We would not have half the stuff in our rig if it wasn't for them. Could not speak any higher of the Sennheiser stuff. It has been great over the years. I really do back their wireless units for sure. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.